New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Welcome. It's wonderful to have you back again. I'm Reverend Sharri Johnson, your host for Global Focus today, and I am so excited I can hardly stand myself today because we have one of my favorite people in the world as a guest, and he has so many things that he does that I couldn't possibly tell you all of them. So I'm just going to mention a couple of my favorites. Our guest is Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. He is the administrator of the affiliated New Thought Network. He is senior minister and co-founder of New Thought Philadelphia. But the most important thing he does, the thing that delights my heart the most, is something that I can't tell you when he does it because I don't know when he does it. It's called God Calls. And it's a subscription thing somehow. I don't even remember how I got connected to it, but I did. And I just love it because several times a week, my phone rings. And when I pick it up, this sweet little feminine voice says, "Here's Dr. Bill with your God call." And there's a little 45-second something I really needed to hear right at that moment that makes me giggle or grin. And then thank you, goodbye, and I hang up. I never know when it's going to happen. I know everybody I know who gets God calls says, it doesn't matter how crappy my day is. When I look down and see that 215 area code, I pick up the phone with a smile on my face. So please help me welcome Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony to Global Focus today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sharri. It's wonderful to be here. And what a great that description of God calls, and that's something that's been going for. I've been in a weekly mastermind group for I think closing in on 20 years. And some number of years ago, we just started calling each other at random to say, "You're the bright light of God's love, and I'm grateful to have you in the world." And then about 2012, maybe, I started recording them and offering them up as a subscription thing. And so 4 times a week, a God call goes out. And it's me being pithy. I like to think of it as a Sunday morning talk in 30 seconds. And that's about how long they are total, 30 seconds. That's what I'm shooting for. And yeah, so there's a library of them, 1,000 maybe, God calls that I've done over the years.
That's a library to which I would like to have a card.
There's a book coming.
Good. I'm glad to hear it because I love me some books. I have a library of my own.
I do.
So,
and you every once in a while let people in.
Oh, yeah, I do. And the goal is to make it globally available 24/7, 365 by making everything online. So hold that in your prayer list. So I'm going to ask you the first question I ask everybody, and then I'm going to pretty much turn you loose. And that is, what brought you to New Thought in the first place? Most of us weren't born there.
No, I actually had spent 20 years in the spiritual desert before I found New Thought. And I grew up Protestant, and I was getting ready for confirmation, and that was in I was 11 or 12 at the time. And they made us go to confirmation classes, and so they're teaching me everything about this. And finally got to the point where I said, there's 2 things that you're saying that that I'm questioning, and you tell me I just have to take those on faith. But everything else you explain, and if the big one, like how do you know Jesus is the only Son of God? If that's true, then the rest of it makes sense. And that was my question. How do you know Jesus was the only Son of God? So and they couldn't answer that. And I told my parents I can't stand up in front of these people and say this is what I believe. So I'm out of here. And my parents, quite surprisingly, didn't say, "Oh, no, you're not." So at 12, I was cast loose. And then when my daughter was born, and I was 20 years later, we needed to have a place to bring her. So we went to the Unitarian Universalist Church for a while, and that was fun, wonderful community, nice people, great folk music, social action. I realized after 3 years or so, they hadn't mentioned God particularly. A friend of mine said, "Hey, go check out the Religious Science Church." So I did, and we were in the process of moving from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa. When I got to Tampa, we checked out, there were a bunch of New Thought communities there, and found one that resonated. And it was like coming home. There's a bunch of people who believe the same thing that I've always believed, have language for it, have songs. There was a community, there's books and classes, and I learned how to do the prayers, and haven't looked back.
Yes. Good. It's that felt like home thing. That it doesn't matter what kind of ministry I'm talking to, that's always the punchline. I knew it was home. And the same for me too. So how did you get from the spiritual desert and home to co-founder and spiritual director? How did that happen? How did you get from Florida to Pennsylvania? And
Well, I grew up in North Jersey, and I had moved to Philadelphia for a job. I was on the radio, and met and married my wife, and then moved to South Carolina, and then to Florida for radio. Got out of the radio biz and was trying like crazy to find somebody who would pay to move me back to Philadelphia, and nobody would. And so I got this job opportunity in Tampa at about the same time that I was discovering, for me it was Religious Science and Religious Science International. And I really got into the teaching when we were in Tampa. And the company that I was working for was a consulting company. It had been bought by a national chain, basically a big printing supplies company. And they had headquarters in Seattle and outside of Philadelphia, and 37 offices. And our little consulting group was to provide technology support for all of them. And so in the midst of all of this, I'm learning how to do prayer, and I'm like, it's working. And so one of the intentions that I set as I'm doing a prayer is I wanted the clarity and the guidance about first of all, whether or not it would be okay for me to move back within range of the families, because it was nice to have a little bit of a buffer, to move back to Pennsylvania, and then, and where my next perfect place is going to be. And the national company had a trade show that they had a big exhibit at every year. And our little group got put in charge of the trade show exhibit. And the trade show originally was going around to different cities. And that year it happened to be in Philadelphia. So the company sent me to Philadelphia for 2 weeks to do this trade show. And so I was there with a rental car and a hotel. And so my wife and my little baby got to come up, and we got to test the waters to see if it would be okay for us to be back in Philadelphia. And it's like, oh yeah, we could definitely do this. And we really like it. There's some great things about this. And a couple of weeks later, the boss came down from headquarters and said, "We're shutting down this division. We're closing the whole thing up." Fired everybody except for 3 of us. And I was the only one in the Tampa office who stayed on. And they said, "We'd like you to come run the test lab at headquarters in Pensacola, New Jersey, which is right across the river from Philadelphia." So that's what got me back to Philadelphia.
sense of humor.
Every step along the way, the same sort of thing has happened. I had the opportunity I got into classes. We were the Goldilocks of New Thought. So I tried this church and that church and the other church. There's some good things about this one, good things about other ones, and found one in Morristown, New Jersey, Carol Lawson was the founding minister there, and she was my teacher, and I did practitioner studies with her, and she was, along the way, she was the president of the affiliated New Thought Network, so I was aware of Anton all the way along. Did practitioner training. I thought that was going to be plenty. Wound up changing churches for a whole bunch of reasons. They said, hey, you want to have a teen group? And I said, not really. I think teenagers are psychopaths.
And how old was your daughter at the time?
12. She was just getting within range of that. And so I said, well, I'm not really interested, but I will be happy to escort the group to their winter camp, which was in Key West in February. And that's how we got these three girls who hated each other to go to teen camp, because it was February in Philadelphia, and we told them they could spend a long weekend in Key West. So they were all on board. And they didn't like each other. They didn't like each other. They were kind of ho-hum about the teaching. Well, we went down there, and they got a dose of love at the teen camp. And on the way home, they said, we're going to have a teen group just like they have in Fort Lauderdale, which is the host group. It's like, it's one of those things where the air shook. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, there's something going on. So the next Sunday, we're doing a presentation to the congregation, and it's going to be these three girls, plus there's another one who hadn't been able to go because she had a soccer game or something that she needed to be in. So she was there, so there was four. And before the end of that Sunday morning, there were two other kids in my teen group. They just happened to be there. And so I became a teen advisor. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. And then my teens started calling me Reverend Bill. And it's like, I don't think so. And I don't think so. And then there was the opportunity to get into ministerial. So I was, all right, I'll do that. And along the way through, my co-founder and I, Dave Schbach, who was in ministry school and has also been a friend for 20, 25 years, it was really clear to us there was not a religious science church in the city of Philadelphia. So we wanted to start a work. And so that's how we founded New Thought Philadelphia. And that was in 2011. And so co-founder, and we were co-spiritual directors. He stepped down in 2020. And so I've been running it myself. And I have no idea how this happened.
It's interesting. I suspect that it is true of people who just do pulpit ministry, which is not a category you fit in. But I know it's true of focus ministers. It's most of us, A, it's not our first career, and B, we spend some time saying, don't be ridiculous. God couldn't possibly want me to be a minister.
Or a teen advisor.
Or which is a real easy way to slip in the back door of ministry, let me tell you.
Apparently so.
And the good thing about that is you did all the hard stuff first, because teens are a lot harder to deal with than adults are. A lot harder.
In some things.
Well,
there are some things where teens are much easier to deal with.
Probably.
I'll give you want a quick example?
Oh, yes.
If you take a bunch of adults and you say, we're going to do a labyrinth for the first time, and you take them to the labyrinth, you have to spend 45 minutes explaining what the labyrinth is and how it's going to work, and energetically it's going to be okay, and this is and basically explaining everything to them. And they walk the labyrinth. I say, that was wonderful. With teens, you say, we're going to walk the labyrinth. When you meet somebody, you pass them this way. And you can stay in the center as long as you want. It's all you need. And they go, okay. And they walk the labyrinth. And then afterwards, they spend 45 minutes talking about what the experience was like. That's the difference.
That is the difference. And that was the perfect example, because a couple of weeks ago was International Labyrinth Day, and I represented Anton at the grand opening of the biggest mosaic labyrinth in the country, which is at Unity Village, 12 minutes from where I live. And I watched the adults, and you had to tell the adults all the stuff. And then the kids, they understood. You gave them their feet, and they were done. They were there. So I get you there. So you also have a book I want to hear about.
I do. It is Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Yeah,
so.
That's a book that would make people spend money.
Well, let's hope.
Well, and because it doesn't, it's not how to make friends and influence people. It's got two of the most important words in the English language: practical and results.
Mm-hmm.
at opposite ends of the title. So tell us about it.
Okay. So in New Thought, the branch that I was trained in is religious science. And Ernest Holmes basically was the Mahath there. And he was, to my way of thinking, a synthesist. So he took the greatest hits of the other religions and combined them together and created what he created. And he found that all of the most effective prayers in all of the religions had some structure in common. So what he did is he figured out what the structure was, and he synthesized this process for doing what he called spiritual mind treatment. And if you tell somebody who is unfamiliar that you're going to do a spiritual mind treatment on them, they get this idea of white lab coats and perhaps somebody reaching into your brain and messing around with stuff. And so it takes a lot of training and indoctrination and coaching for somebody to be okay with spiritual mind treatment. And of course, in religious science churches and centers for spiritual living, which is what they're calling it now, it's perfectly normal for somebody to say, for somebody to say, oh, I was having an issue, so I went to a practitioner and got a spiritual mind treatment, so I manifested a demonstration. And their friend will say, oh, that's wonderful. And somebody overhearing that, like a newbie who's there like having coffee after this, what? It's like, what are you talking about? And the language was antiquated, left over from when Ernest Holmes did his work 100 years ago. And in the manner of doing what we say and saying what we do and meaning, using our language clearly, I basically relanguaged spiritual mind treatment because it's a practical prayer. It is a prayer to get a result. So the same conversation, instead of being... I went to a practitioner for spiritual mind treatment and manifested a demonstration. I went to somebody who's trained to do practical prayer, and when we got a result. It's like, oh, I understand it. You didn't have to explain it. There's no decoder ring that's involved in this, and it just makes it easier. So that was the basis of practical prayer. And the book is a book that I wanted to offer to my students, and nobody had written this book. I wanted a quick primer. Here's how you do the steps that are in the prayer, and then these are why they're meaningful. But I wanted sample prayers. I wanted to be able to say, oh, you got a prosperity prayer? Go to page number 27, and there's a prosperity prayer. And there's a blank line in there, so if you want to put your specific thing, you fill it in.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because that book you said nobody wrote, let me show it to you. I wrote it 10 years ago. In fact, I wrote two of them. I wrote one for adults and one for children. This one's called Treatment with Training Wheels.
I love it.
The pages are all split, so you can
my goodness.
You can make 24,300,000 different prayers by just taking one of each, because there's 30 prayers in here. The children's book is smaller. It has the primer at the beginning, and it only has 15, but they're all different colors.
Ooh.
So you rainbow prayers with that one. So great minds run in the same channels. No wonder I want your book.
Well, here's one now.
Yay.
So, and there are 40 prayers in there, 39 of which I wrote, and the other is the example prayer from one of the famous religions, because the Lord's Prayer actually follows the steps spot on. It is a 7-step spiritual mind treatment / practical prayer. And so I left the original by Jesus in.
That is so wonderful. I didn't think to put that in mine, but I'm glad you did, and I want the book. So,
well, and who uses hallowed in their everyday language?
Not anybody I know. But on the other hand, my favorite version of the Lord's Prayer was in Aramaic because it was so beautiful. It just lifted me out of my chair, And I didn't understand a word of it. I felt the vibration of it, but I didn't understand the word of it. It didn't matter a bit. So I wouldn't worry too much about blowing people off with hallowed. So we've talked about God calls. How do people get in line?
There is no line. There's plenty of capacity. You go to godcall.org, which is the website, and it's dedicated to the God Calls website.
Here in a minute.
Yeah, you can put a little thing on there. Godcall.org, and you sign up for it. Basically, it's a subscription thing. You get 2 weeks for free. So you put it on your PayPal, and you get a couple of weeks for free. And if you don't like it, then you just cancel. And other than that, it's like $5.95 a month.
Has anybody ever canceled?
Every once in a while. Yeah, and what happens is the reason
I would fight somebody who tried to take my God calls away.
sometimes what happens is their voicemail gets filled, and they change the payment method on their PayPal. But that's generally what the reasons are.
Good.
I'm remarkably not repetitive. And I mean, the idea behind a God call is I do metaphysical metaphors. So you can give me a topic and I will come up with what that means metaphysically. And each of the God calls could pretty much be stretched out into an entire Sunday morning talk.
Oh, easily. Very easily.
There are ministers that use it for that. And that's like my superpower. And apparently because other people are not nearly as quick at it as I am.
So I know that you're the the new admin for Anton. So,
yep, this is my first month on the job.
And I know that Anton has a retreat coming up in October, but I suspect that's not the only kind of event you're going to this year, is it?
No, I'm keeping myself busy this year.
What all are you doing?
Well, let's see. I'm the administrator of the Affiliated New Thought Network, and I am also on the executive board of the International New Thought Alliance. And both organizations are having events. So the INTA 108th World Congress, it's not the annual World Congress. We've been doing it every year, except 1 year during World War II. So the organization is 109. It's the 108th Congress. It's in Fort Lauderdale in July, and I will be there for that. And of course, I am way deep involved in the Anton Retreat, as are you, which is at Unity Village in scenic Lee's Summit, Missouri. And that's going to be the first week in October, and that is just going to be a powerhouse. It used to be a conference, then it became a conference retreat, and this year it's really going to feel retreat-like because there will be plenty of time for people to get fed and also to go and have their own free time, sacred time to do the things that are filling them. We got some wonderful keynote speakers. Jafan Seeley is going to be there. James Mellon is going to be doing one of the keynotes for us. Lisa Benson is there. Daniel Namad and Nemo are going to be there. They're doing a concert together. Nemo's doing a workshop. Daniel's going to be the music director. I mean, it's going to be an event. I always get filled at the Anton Retreat, and I think this one's going to be the best ever.
See, and I got to tell you, it's not new that it's going to be an event that's the greatest ever. Anton is that retreat. I go through my year waiting for that retreat. I mean, it is so wonderful. And you skipped over something that's happening in August that's kind of non-true.
I did. And, that's sort of me trying to billboard the the Anton Retreat, where I was the chair of the retreat committee until I took on the employee position or contract position as the administrator. So we're sharing the workload again, but that's what I'm passionate about. I will also be in Chicago with 10,000 of my closest spiritual friends for the Parliament of World Religions, which is going to be in the middle of August at McCormick Place. So, and that promises to be pretty powerful. And we've managed to get all of the New Thought organizations together to be unified as New Thought. So the couple of parliaments ago, New Thought was recognized as a world religion. And now, for the first time, we are all there together. So it's Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity and Divine Science and Universal Foundation for Better Living and Hillside Chapel and INTA is going to be there, Anton's going to be there, Association for Global New Thought is going to be there. And we have it set up so that there are a bunch of like exhibit hall booths, and I think we've got 6 of those booths, and they're taking out all of the separation between them, so we're all going to be in this one space together.
Excellent. This was a bucket list thing for me, going to the Parliament of World Religions, so I'm really excited about that too. So
I'm excited about the Parliament of World Religions. I was having some PTSD about going to McCormick Place because I used to, the trade show that I was talking about that was in Philadelphia that one year, wound up after that being at McCormick Place every year. And the last time I was there, I went home a little early. The show was still going on, and that was September 10th, 2001.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah. So that's the last time I was at McCormick Place.
Okay, so let's talk about something different, or maybe not, actually. It's probably not. You talk about spiritual adventure.
Yes.
People say spiritual journey all the time, but spiritual adventure piques my curiosity.
There are a couple of things that went into spiritual adventures. And when I was working with the teens, what I learned early on, and what everybody who had been working with teens in New Thought knew, is that you can't teach a teenager anything. However, you can facilitate a teenager learning something. So what we did was experiential activities. So when we're going to do, for example, an exercise on learning balance, instead of taking them through a talk about being in balance and living your life in balance, we get a 4x4, a 4x4 beam, and put it on the floor with some little things to keep it from tipping over, and say, okay, walk the length of this little balance beam. And they do. And they say, okay, now put on the blindfold and do it. And they do that. And say, okay, now do it with the blindfold backwards. And they do that, and there's a little bit of struggling. And then you tie a bungee cord from their leg to their arm, and you tell them to walk the balance beam backwards. And then you have somebody who's trying to push them off the balance beam as they're walking along it backwards with the blindfold on. And the activity is having that struggle of not being able to stay in balance. And then you say, all right, and these are going to be the two people who are going to help you. Okay, these are going to be the slightly visible hands of the infinite that are holding you up on the balance beam. And it turns out that nothing else throws you off balance when you're in partnership with that power. And then you do a post process on it. And it turns out that everybody can learn by doing those sorts of things. So years of being a teen advisor gives me the ability to set up those experiential activities, and those are spiritual adventures. And it turns out you don't have to do an experiential for a spiritual adventure. We had the wonderful idea, because we had a meetup group for New Thought Philadelphia, and there was 100 people in our meetup group. And my friend Reverend Joanne McFadden, who's a CSL Focus minister in upstate New York, in the Albany area.
Yes, she was my friend too.
Yeah, and so she has a teaching chapter there, and she and I actually did the Northeast New Thought teen group together. So she was my co-conspirator in working with the teens, and she rebranded her meetup group as Spiritual Adventures. And she said, give it a try. So we did. And the Philly Spiritual Adventures now has 1,600 members. And we just take everything that we do and we make a spiritual adventure out of it. When the pandemic started, I realized we're all going to be home for a while. So I started doing meditation calls twice a day, 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and open them up to everybody. We put them on Zoom as soon as Zoom became a thing, which was, I think, sometime in March of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so, once a day on the weekends. And that's part of the spiritual adventure. And we have people who are participating in those meditations from all over the world. We have a guy in Scotland who's a regular, and somebody in London who's there all the time. People who live in Phoenix and Los Angeles and Milwaukee and Durham and all over the country, as well as people in Philadelphia who are joining our twice-a-day meditations. And by the way, anybody who wants to can do that. You go to newthoughtphilly.org, and it's got the information on there, including the Zoom meeting link, which I'm not going to read aloud here because it's just a bunch of numbers. But yeah, Eastern time, 8 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening. There's not an obligation. It's not like you have to sign up and come to a certain number of them. There are people who disappear for months at a time and then come back around, and it's delightful to see them. And it's a small enough group that we get to spend some time connecting with each other ahead of time and talking about what's going on. And then, of course, we queue it up. So whatever somebody's been talking about, we get to do a meditation and a prayer based on that, because that's what I do.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. And so those are spiritual adventures. And we don't call our Sunday morning thing church, because there are some people who are allergic to the word church. So it's a celebration. That's a spiritual adventure.
Well, and that doesn't surprise me, because you haven't mentioned one of your skills that just tickles me to death. There are two of them connected. One of them is that you're a magician.
I have spent some time as a magician.
And the other is that you understand the joys of stand-up comedy very, very thoroughly.
I do.
And that, if you make people laugh, they listen to the words.
So that was actually one of the things that I missed the most when we went online, is people in the room laughing. Because you can see on Zoom that somebody's having a reaction, but it's not the same as getting them to laugh out loud in the room. So we've gone back to doing hybrid on Sundays, and it's nice to have the side conversation and be able to make people giggle. But yeah, I spent time when I was a kid doing marionette shows and also magic shows, and a little prestidigitation. So, and sometimes, as an experiential thing, it's fun to bring a magic trick that I've known for 40, 50 years and use it in a spiritual context to make a point.
Yep.
Yep. And making something appear out of nowhere is like...
You did two of them at last year's Anton retreat that I just loved. The one with the rope. Mm-hmm. That's like a classic. That one should have its handprint on the sidewalk in front of the Grauman's Chinese Theater. And the other one was the blind spot thing. That wasn't
even a magic trick. That's an actual thing.
It's just physics, but it was really cool. I saw a person on a comic relief program back in the 90s, I think, juggling a chainsaw, a bowling ball, and a raw egg. Mm-hmm. And that became my metaphor for the kind of life you live, especially. So tell us a little bit about what Anton is and what the administrator, that's a nice title, administrator. What does the administrator do?
Anton is a membership organization, and there are about 140 members at this point. And it started out being for ministers, and it has grown quite broadly and quite intentionally, so that it is ministers and participants and spiritual seekers from all over the country. And it was intended from the get-go to be a cross-pollination amongst all of the New Thought denominations. So religious science and centers for spiritual living, and unity and divine science and UFBL, and basically everybody who's on this New Thought path. So the organization itself is all about connecting together, to being the connector of New Thought, and to allow the people who are involved in this to connect with each other. On a peer-to-peer level and organizational level. So it can be everything from ministers sharing resources. So if you're looking for a reading or a talk topic or an experiential activity, there's a resource library where you can find stuff like that. And if you're just somebody who's into this and you want to spend more time with people who are into the same teaching, there's a gather and gab activity. So once a month we get together on a Zoom, and there's no agenda. It's just like, let's get together and talk. And sometimes those are amazingly fun. Once we had somebody who had been in the New Thought teaching since the 1960s, and the person at the other end of the spectrum had just joined their center the week before, and it was brand new to it. And talking about just an eclectic variety of things. So Anton is an organization that's about connecting people, and as the administrator of Anton, I make sure that the stuff that we're doing is on the website, and I make sure that the meeting minutes get taken, and that if somebody has a question or a problem or wants to buy something or donate something, that it goes in the proper direction. And I'm basically the first line of person who's going to say, oh, well, how can I help you? And either do it myself or direct it to Michelle Whittington, who's the executive director, or Jerry Troyer, who's the president of the board, or the other board members. And there's a membership committee and a finance team, and there's other people. But as the administrator, I basically make sure that the gears stay oiled, and the machine keeps working.
So you're the public face of Anton.
I'm one of them.
You're what?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take that. And so
When you call the Anton number, the person who calls you back is me.
there you go. So what's the difference between Anton and INTA?
Great question. And having been involved in both organizations, that's a question that I started asking 2 years ago and kind of nudging both organizations to own their difference. The International New Thought Alliance, like I said, it's been around for 110 years, 109, I think. And there was a precursor organization before that, because before they were known as the International New Thought Alliance, they were the New Thought Congress, and they were the Metaphysical League. And it started out in the late 1800s. And it was started by the people who founded these denominations, like the Fillmores, who founded Unity, were part of this organization. And Ernest Holmes was in the organization. And Thomas Troward was a vice president of the INTA. And the causative people, the Melinda Kramer, I don't think was a member, but she went to the events. And so everybody has this lineage with the International New Thought Alliance. And the Congress is set for, what is our vision? What are we doing together? And what's the future hold for us to be able to organizationally work together. And Anton is very much a network of people who are doing this stuff right now. So the big picture is really important, and what somebody's doing in California or New York or in the middle of the country is important, but the focus is, where am I? How can I help you? How can we be together and in community? So it's kind of the scale and scope of the focus of the organizations is different. And INTA also has a facility. There's an office in Mesa, Arizona, which happens to house the world's largest archive of New Thought materials. It is the Jack Addington Archive, and it is a real live thing. I've actually been there. I was there earlier this year, specifically so I could go see it. And it's got some cool stuff. It's got a prayer shawl that Thomas Troward, donated to INTA, and it's got a statue of Emma Curtis Hopkins sitting in the little conference room there. And it's cool stuff. It's got a prayer box where the prayers from all of the congresses, going as far back as anyone can remember, are still there.
Oh, now I have to go to Mesa, Arizona.
Or wait, it's possible that the archive will move to a place near you. So that's...
But, there are not a whole lot of things I like to travel for, but that's one of them. It just got bumped onto it wasn't even on the bucket list, and now it's way up at the top. So that's good.
Yeah, I went there not expecting anything, and B. Kenny, who's doing a lot of work in the archive, he's just showing me around. Other than it being 60 degrees because it's an actual archive vault,
Right.
It was. She's usually just looking around, and it's like, here's the daily word, and it's every daily word ever. And she says, "When's your birthday?" And I told her when my birthday.
I love that.
And as I said, and it's not like that's the only place you can do that, because you can do the same thing at the Unity Archive.
Yeah. I did at Unity Village, and it just made my whole week to have a daily word from the day I was born.
Yeah, and there are other collections that are in there as well. I mean, there is a whole shelf full of Melinda Kramer's writing. The book that Greg Braden wrote, Spirits and Rebellion, which is the history of New Thought, all of his work in progress notes are on a shelf there in the Unity Archive, or in the Addington Archive. So just some really cool stuff.
Boy, I'll say. So there are some questions I ask every single guest.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you the last one first, because I don't want it to fall through the cracks, and then I'll back up and ask you the other. So the last one is there anything that you'd really like to talk about that I haven't asked you?
I just like to talk about New Thought and the teaching. I like talking about God. I like talking about prayer. And I like talking about how we can support each other and get this teaching out. My mission in life is, I found this teaching, and it was a game changer for me, as we've been blathering on about for the last 40 minutes. And I just think that it is such a powerful and fundamental theory and philosophy and teaching and practice and lifestyle that there are a lot of people out there who are looking for it. So my purpose in life is to take that bright light that's the New Thought teaching and hoist it up high enough that people who are looking for it can find it. And so that's what I'm passionate about. So if I say nothing else, just that's who Bill is.
Okay, so here's my first. Everybody gets this. Normally, my first. Everybody gets this.
This is like Casey Kasem, and you're counting them down.
I love Casey Kasem. I listen to him every Sunday on my way to church. Well, celebration. So anyhow, the first one is, how does what you do, all of these, I mean, your ministry is so multidimensional. It's like one of those marble balls that you see. They take a gazing ball and they covered it with dragon eyes so that it sparkles in the garden. That's what your ministry is like. How does that encourage, enhance, develop, pick your own verb, conscious evolution?
I think that's the answer to that is the same as the question or the one before, which is people are getting the message however they're getting the message. So my job isn't to say it. My job is to share it in a way that somebody can get it. And, if it's showing up through the humor, if it's showing up through the meditations, if it's showing up through the work that I'm doing with INTA or Anton, that's great. This is what I'm doing to spread the teaching around. And it looks like lots of different things. And depending on how you look at it, it looks different.
Well, I like that answer because one of the things I say is the reason this program exists is that there are as many different spiritual paths out there as there are people on the face of the planet.
Yep.
And the goal of New Thought is to find a way to bring the light to every single one of them. So, next question I ask everybody. How does your ministry, however you want to approach it, enhance, encourage, support, extend world peace?
World peace. Okay. My usual rant on world
peace. That you can take care of eliminating hunger, but for now we'll start with world peace.
Well, I'm going to start with the asterisk that I don't pray for world peace because there are people who are disadvantaged at this point, and if things were to become peaceful, then they would remain disadvantaged. And the reason that they're fighting is because they're defending their turf. Like if you say, okay, world peace starting now, then like what's Ukraine going to do? Because they got people who are like taking their space.
I don't mean world peace as the absence of war. I mean world peace as justice for everyone, food for everyone, housing for everyone, education for everyone, comfort for everyone, spiritual support for everyone. That's what peace is. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of presence.
Okay.
You want to answer it again now?
Well, I think it's a different question because what you mean by world peace is different than what most people who use the term world peace think that they're meaning. And so for that, that's the same point. Everybody has their own path to wherever it is that they're going. And I think that the peace that you're talking about is an inside job.
Yes.
Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. If I'm not peaceful, then I'm not going to be in a peaceful environment. And the work that I'm doing lets people find their own equilibrium and balance and maybe learn something about themselves so that they can bring more peace into everything that they're doing. Or not. That's the idea.
So the last question, the next to the last question is 10 years from now, if everything goes exactly the way you would like it to go, every single teeny tiny little detail in every part of everything goes exactly the way you want it to go, what will your ministry look like?
Resonating and connecting with a large number of people, whether it's me directly or the people who I've worked with in the concentric ripples, going out into the pond, of carrying the teaching. So what my ministry would look like wouldn't be about me. It would be about more people understanding principle more people being able to work with this divine principle that we have. I mean, the New Thought teaching is so simple. It is so simple that you can, not only can you explain it to a kindergartner, you don't have to explain it to a kindergartner because they get it before they've been trained that it doesn't work, and they have to give up their beliefs and be subservient to some force outside of themselves. So for me, my successful ministry would be, however that happens, for a large portion of the people on earth who are seeking this to be experiencing it and knowing it and sharing it. You know, I'd love to be able to do the scientific study that proves that prayer works. That was my doctoral thesis.
Yeah.
70% of scientists believe that prayer works, and no percent of scientists believe that it's been proven.
Oh, but you know what's more important than that? Back in 2012, I think, a huge assortment of scientists got together in Europe and produced a document that says consciousness, conscious awareness is not the exclusive domain of humanity. That, to me, is the beginning of the kind of peace on earth that I really want to see. So here's the very last question I ask every single person who comes on this show.
Okay.
Come back.
Was that a question?
Yes, that's the question. Will you
I thought that was will I come back?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Okay. The first opening of January. You can have any Tuesday from then on.
I'm not looking at my calendar right now.
Oh,
30th of January is probably going to be okay.
I'll take it. Thank you. I don't let people escape. I put them in the book just as soon as they say yes.
Okay. Well, I like to answer that one by saying I'm going to a funeral that day.
Are you? You want me to give you a different day?
Really? The 30th of January? We know who's going to be dead by then? No.
Okay, good.
You don't plan funerals that far in advance.
Well, if it happens, that's why one of the things I'm going to send you an email and ask for, if I haven't already, is an emergency contact number. So thank you for being here. I can't wait until the 30th of January to have you back again, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Chicago and in Lee's Summit. And everybody, please come next week, because next week we have another person from Anton, or who I met through Anton, Reverend Dr. Missy Higginbotham. She's been here before. She said she'd come back, and next week's her second visit. So don't miss it. She's exciting and wonderful and a hoot and a half. See you then. Bye-bye.
Amazing, amazing. You will do amazing things. Amazing, amazing. You will do amazing things.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.